Dave Fletcher had 3 rules for surviving as a maintenance technician on the UES Diplomat, the United Earth's flagship interstellar diplomatic vessel: never volunteer for anything, always carry a multi-tool, and under no circumstances should you ever make eye contact with an ambassador. The last rule had served him particularly well during his 4-year stint aboard the glorified conference room, masquerading as humanity's greatest achievement. "Fletcher, my quarter's atmospheric regulator is making that noise again." Ambassador Wolcott's voice boomed down the corridor. Dave pretended not to hear as he focused intently on the access panel before him, mentally calculating how long he could reasonably remain hunched inside the wall before someone called his supervisor. "I know you can hear me, Fletcher. Your comm unit is literally blinking. Damn technology." Dave sighed and extracted himself from the conduit, plastering on what he hoped was a neutral expression rather than the grimace he felt. "Ambassador Wolcott, what an unexpected pleasure. Save it. The regulator. Fix it before the Nexorian delegation boards tomorrow. Their environmental tolerances are extremely precise." Dave nodded, knowing full well the precise tolerances were entirely psychological. The Nexorians breathed the same nitrogen-oxygen mix as humans, just with a bit more melodrama about it. "I'll add it to my list, Ambassador. See that it's at the top, and for God's sake put on a clean uniform. You're representing humanity." As Wolcott strode away, Dave muttered, "If I'm representing humanity, we're in deeper trouble than I thought." Back in his cramped quarters, which were less living space and more storage closet with a cot, Dave scrolled through his assignments for the next cycle. 27 tasks, all marked urgent, which rendered the designation completely meaningless. At the bottom of his list was a new entry: Maintenance Tech Fletcher to join Nexorian welcome delegation, mandatory attendance. What? Dave stared at the screen. No, no, no. This violated rule number 1 so spectacularly that he wondered if Captain Monroe had finally made good on her threat to integrate the background staff into diplomatic functions to present a unified crew image. Whatever corporate management book she'd been reading needed to be jettisoned into the nearest star. He tapped his comm unit. "Fletcher to Maintenance Chief Ortiz." "What is it, Fletcher?" Ortiz's perpetually exasperated voice crackled through. "There's been a mistake on my assignment roster. I'm listed for the Nexorian Welcome Committee." "No mistake. Captain's orders. All department representatives. You drew the short straw. But the atmospheric regulators will be there when you get back. Wear your dress grays. And Fletcher." "Yeah? Try not to say anything. You-ish." The comm clicked off. Dave fell backward onto his cot and stared at the ceiling, where a small crack had been steadily growing for the past 7 months. He'd filed 3 repair requests, all denied due to non-essential cosmetic concerns. "Perfect," he said to no one. "Put the maintenance guy who can't get his own ceiling fixed in front of alien royalty." What could possibly go wrong? The Nexorian delegation was supposed to be the diplomatic coup of the decade, a primitive but resource-rich species with a monarchy-based government that had, until recently, been entirely isolationist. Their planet contained the largest known deposits of quantum-stabilized palladium in the galaxy, a critical component for faster-than-light drives. Every spacefaring species wanted an alliance, and somehow, through what Dave assumed was either blind luck or outright bribery, humanity had secured the first formal visit from Queen Valeria and her entourage. Dave's datapad pinged with yet another update. "All personnel assigned to welcome delegation briefing in Conference Room 3, 1800 hours. Wonderful. A meeting about a meeting, just when he thought bureaucracy had reached its final form. 15 minutes before the briefing, Dave reluctantly donned his dress grays, the uncomfortable, stiff uniform that had been worn precisely twice before, once for his official ID photo, and once when his mother had visited the ship. Both occasions had been equally awkward. As he made his way to Conference Room 3, he caught his reflection in a polished bulkhead. The uniform didn't look half bad, providing you ignored the person wearing it. Dave Fletcher, 34, with perpetually tousled brown hair that refused to conform to regulation styling, eyes that couldn't decide if they were blue or gray, and the kind of unremarkable face that people forgot even while looking directly at it. The perfect maintenance technician, functionally invisible until something broke. The diplomatic briefing was exactly as mind-numbing as Dave had anticipated. 2 hours of cultural sensitivity training delivered by Commander Prisha Kapoor, the ship's xenoanthropologist, whose enthusiasm for Nexorian ceremonial nose rings was matched only by her apparent immunity to the human need for bathroom breaks. Remember, Commander Kapoor emphasized for what felt like the 50th time, never show the bottom of your feet to a Nexorian noble. It implies you believe they are lower than dirt. What if we're doing somersaults? asked Ensign Miller, a fresh-faced communications officer who still believed jokes were appropriate during briefings. Commander Kapoor's smile could have flash-frozen nitrogen. There will be no somersaults, Ensign. This isn't the circus. Dave kept his head down, doodling what might have been a schematic for fixing the persistent issue with recycled water tasting like old socks, but was actually just a series of increasingly angry stick figures. His strategy was working perfectly until Technician Fletcher. Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the proper Nexorian greeting. Every head in the room swiveled toward him. Dave looked up slowly. I was reviewing my notes, Commander. Wonderful. Then you'll have no problem showing us the greeting. Dave stood awkwardly, racking his brain for any detail that might have penetrated his deliberate mental barricade against this information. You bow? At the waist? Commander Kapoor's sigh could have powered a small turbine. You place your right hand over your heart, extend your left palm upward, and incline your head precisely 30 degrees while saying Nexora tum valior. Dave attempted the gesture, which felt like trying to pat his head and rub his stomach while also attempting to flag down a taxi. Your pronunciation suggests you're offering to clean their waste disposal units rather than paying respects, Kapoor noted. Perhaps stick to nodding silently. The next morning, as the entire welcome delegation assembled in the main docking bay, Dave's dress grays felt 2 sizes too small, and his collar seemed determined to garrote him. Captain Monroe paced before the assembled crew, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a regulation bun so tight it gave her a perpetual look of mild surprise. People, this is not a drill, this is potentially the most significant first contact follow-up in human history. The initial probe communication was promising, but physical diplomatic relations are another matter entirely. The Nexorians are a proud people with technology roughly equivalent to Earth's Renaissance period, but with a social structure and philosophical sophistication that rivals our own. She paused dramatically. And they're sitting on enough quantum-stabilized palladium to power our entire fleet for a century. Everyone nodded with appropriate gravity. Dave wondered if he could loosen his collar without anyone noticing. The Queen and her entourage will be transported directly to our ship via our shuttles. They've never been off-world before, so expect some adjustment issues. Technician Fletcher. Dave snapped to attention so quickly he nearly pulled a muscle. Yes, Captain. You're our atmospheric control representative. If anyone from the delegation mentions any discomfort with the air temperature or humidity, you fix it immediately. Understood? Yes, Captain. Great. Glorified thermostat duty. The delegation arrived with considerably more fanfare than Dave had expected. The Nexorians, it turned out, traveled with their own fanfare, literally. 4 royal musicians entered first, playing instruments that resembled elongated flutes, made from what appeared to be polished bone. The haunting, dissonant melody they produced made the hairs on Dave's arms stand up. Following the musicians came 6 royal guards, each bearing a ceremonial spear and wearing armor that seemed to be constructed from overlapping plates of a crystalline material that refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. Their faces were concealed behind helmets, shaped like stylized animal heads, predators from their homeworld, Dave presumed. Then came Queen Valeria herself. Dave had seen images of Nexorians in the briefing materials he'd mostly ignored, but they didn't do justice to the reality. The Queen stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent blue-green skin that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. Her 4 arms moved with hypnotic grace, and atop her elongated head sat a crown that appeared to be growing directly from her skull, a biological feature, not an accessory. Her eyes, all 3 of them, were solid gold without pupils, yet somehow conveyed a penetrating intelligence. Welcome aboard the UES Diplomat, Your Majesty. Captain Monroe said, executing a perfect Nexorian greeting. We are honored by your presence. Queen Valeria's mouth, a delicate slit that stretched horizontally across her face, curved upward. When she spoke, her voice had an almost musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Captain Monroe of Earth, the stories of human hospitality have reached even our distant shores. We are pleased to finally meet face to faces. Dave noticed a small translator device attached to the Queen's ceremonial robe, converting her native language, which sounded like liquid being poured over crystal, into slightly awkward English. As the official greetings continued, Dave found himself standing rigidly at the back of the human delegation, trying not to fidget. One of the Queen's advisors, a shorter Nexorian with rust-colored markings across his face, kept glancing in Dave's direction with what appeared to be suspicion. Dave tried the greeting gesture Commander Kapoor had taught them, but only succeeded in looking like he was having a mild muscle spasm. The initial reception moved to the ship's grand conference room, which had been specially decorated with tapestries and artifacts, meant to honor Nexorian culture. Dave was stationed near an environmental control panel, ready to adjust conditions at a moment's notice. For the first hour, everything proceeded smoothly. Captain Monroe and Queen Valeria exchanged formal pleasantries. Ambassador Wolcott made a speech about interspecies cooperation that managed to be simultaneously grandiose and completely devoid of substance, and the Nexorian delegation seemed appropriately impressed by the technological marvels of the ship. Then it all went spectacularly wrong. It started with a small dispute between two of the Queen's advisors, a heated exchange in their crystalline language that escalated quickly. Before anyone could intervene, one of them pulled out a small device that looked like an ornate jewelry box and opened it. The box emitted a high-pitched whine that made everyone in the room wince. "Treachery," shouted the rust-marked advisor, pointing at the box. "The Royal Harmonic Resonator has been tampered with. This is sabotage." The Queen rose to her full height, all three eyes widening. "Who would dare?" From outside the conference room came the sound of commotion. The doors burst open, and three more Nexorians rushed in, these wearing simple gray robes rather than the ornate attire of the royal delegation. "Death to the monarch who would sell our world to the star travelers," one of them shouted, and raised what looked like a primitive crossbow. Everything happened at once. The royal guards moved to protect their queen, but they were on the wrong side of the room. Captain Monroe shouted for security. Ambassador Wolcott dove under the conference table with surprising agility for a man his age. And Dave Fletcher, who had been thinking about lunch and whether the replicator would be serving that not quite lasagna again, found himself directly between the armed intruder and Queen Valeria. Dave had approximately half a second to process what was happening. His brain, unhelpfully, chose this critical moment to remind him that he hadn't filed his quarterly maintenance report, and that his left sock had a hole in it. The crossbow, if you could call the exotic, crystalline weapon that was aimed squarely at Queen Valeria's central eye. The would-be assassin's finger tensed on the trigger. Security personnel were still reaching for weapons. The Queen's guards were shouting in their musical language too far away to intervene. Dave didn't think. This was fortunate because thinking would have involved calculating odds of survival, which were decidedly not in his favor. "Oh, for crying out," was all he managed before his body launched itself forward. Time slowed. Dave had always thought that was just a cliché in bad action movies, but apparently when your body decides to do something catastrophically stupid, your perception really does shift to give you an extended view of your own idiocy. The arrow, actually more of a crystalline shard that hummed as it flew, caught him in the shoulder rather than the heart, which was small comfort as white-hot pain exploded through his body. The impact spun him sideways into a decorative plant stand which crashed to the floor along with him and Queen Valeria's ceremonial gift of fossilized something or other. But Dave wasn't done with his heroics yet. As he fell, he noticed the assassin knocking a second arrow. With a grunt that contained at least 3 unprofessional expletives, Dave grabbed the heaviest object within reach, the broken plant stand, and hurled it at the attacker's legs. His aim, much like his life choices, was questionable at best. The stand missed the assassin entirely, but struck another intruder who had been moving to flank the royal guards. This unexpected hit created just enough confusion for the ship's security to finally get their act together. Dave's vision began tunneling as he watched the security team tackle the assassins. The pain in his shoulder had gone from screaming to a strange, distant throbbing. He became aware of a face hovering above him. Queen Valeria herself, all 3 golden eyes wide with what might have been concern. "The human sacrifices himself for Nexoria," she said, her translator making the words sound oddly flat compared to the musical tones of her actual voice. "Not sacrificing," Dave managed to mumble. "Just really bad at ducking." The Queen placed one of her 4 hands on his forehead. Her skin felt cool and slightly textured, like touching fine-grained leather. "A life debt is formed. The ancient laws are clear." Dave tried to explain that no debt was necessary, he'd simply been standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, as usual, but unconsciousness finally claimed him. His last thought being that someone else would have to fix Ambassador Wolcott's atmospheric regulator after all. Dave woke to the familiar antiseptic smell of the medical bay and the unfamiliar sensation of being important. His shoulder felt like it had been removed, run through a garbage disposal, then reattached by someone whose medical training consisted entirely of watching surgery videos on mute. "He's awake," announced Dr. Patel, the ship's chief medical officer, "and remarkably not dead." Dave tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Doc. The crystal arrow missed your major arteries by 2 millimeters, Doctor," Patel said, checking readings on a monitor. "Either you're the luckiest idiot on this ship, or you have guardian angels with excellent spatial awareness." Before Dave could respond, the privacy curtain around his bed was yanked aside to reveal Captain Monroe, Ambassador Wolcott, and Commander Kapoor, all wearing expressions that ranged from bewildered to constipated. "Fletcher," Captain Monroe said. "You've created an interstellar incident." Dave blinked. "I got shot. How is that my fault?" Ambassador Wolcott stepped forward, his jowls quivering with what might have been excitement or indigestion. "You saved Queen Valeria's life in front of witnesses. Do you have any idea what that means in Nexorian culture? That I'm due for a thank you card." Commander Kapoor made a sound suspiciously like a snort before composing herself. In Nexorian culture, a life debt, particularly a royal life debt, is their most sacred bond. The Queen is now obligated to reward you according to their ancient traditions. "Great," Dave said weakly. "Can the reward be a week off and maybe a better quarters assignment?" The three officers exchanged glances that set off every internal alarm Dave possessed. "The Nexorians are insisting you attend a formal reward ceremony on their world," Captain Monroe said. "The diplomatic implications are significant. You're our first human to ever set foot on Nexoria," Ambassador Wolcott added, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. "It should have been me or the captain, not a maintenance technician with no diplomatic training." "To be fair," Dave pointed out, "my diplomatic strategy of jump in front of deadly projectiles seems to be working pretty well so far." Dr. Patel, who had been silently monitoring Dave's vitals, chimed in. "He'll need at least 3 days before he can travel." "Perfect," Commander Kapoor said. "That gives us time to prepare him." "Prepare me for what exactly?" Dave asked, suddenly wary. "Queen Valeria was quite specific about the reward ceremony," Captain Monroe replied. "Apparently, saving royalty comes with certain traditional obligations." "What kind of obligations?" Ambassador Wolcott cleared his throat. "They wouldn't say exactly, only that it's their highest honor and that refusing would be a catastrophic insult that would end any hope of a resource treaty. So I have to accept a mystery reward or our entire mission fails." Dave summarized. "Essentially," Commander Kapoor confirmed. "And you need to act appropriately grateful, no matter what it is." "This is because I didn't pay attention during the cultural briefing, isn't it?" Dave sighed. "The universe is punishing me." "The universe doesn't care enough to punish you specifically." "Fletcher," Captain Monroe said dryly. "This is just spectacularly bad luck. For all of us." As the officers left, Dave stared at the ceiling, which was blessedly free of the crack that plagued his quarters. His shoulder throbbed in time with his heartbeat, a persistent reminder of his impulsive action. 3 days passed in a blur of painkillers, intensive Nexorian cultural briefings from Commander Kapoor, and increasingly bizarre rumors about what the reward might entail. The ship's betting pool had odds on everything from ritual scarification to adoption into the royal family. By the time Dave was cleared for travel and standing in the shuttle bay in a freshly replicated dress uniform, he'd convinced himself that whatever awaited him on Nexoria couldn't possibly be as bad as everyone feared. The universe wasn't that creatively cruel. The universe, as it turned out, begged to differ. Nexoria was beautiful in the way that things which can kill you often are. The planet's twin suns cast an eerie purple glow over crystalline forests and vast plateaus of what appeared to be living stone. Dave gazed through the shuttle viewport, torn between genuine awe and calculating how many emergency exits he could reach if things went sideways. "Remember," Commander Kapoor whispered as they descended toward the royal city, "accept everything with gratitude, make no sudden movements. And for the love of all things sacred, don't make any jokes about their third eye." "That wasn't on my agenda, but thanks for the tip," Dave muttered. The landing platform extended from a tower that seemed to be growing rather than built, its organic architecture pulsing slightly as if breathing. A delegation of 50 Nexorian nobles awaited them, their multicolored skin creating a hypnotic rainbow effect against the city's crystalline backdrop. Captain Monroe led their small group herself, Ambassador Wolcott, Commander Kapoor, and Dave, the reluctant guest of honor, down the shuttle ramp. Dave's repaired shoulder twinged with every step, a persistent reminder of why he was here. A Nexorian minister stepped forward, his rust-colored facial markings identifying him as the same suspicious advisor from the ship. "The hero of the crown approaches," he announced in his own language, the translator pinned to Dave's chest rendering the words in slightly stilted English. Dave managed the formal greeting without looking like he was having a seizure this time. Small victories. They were led through corridors that seemed to sing with every footfall, the crystalline structure of the building resonating with their movements. Dave noticed that Ambassador Wolcott was sweating profusely, while Captain Monroe's usually impassive face had developed a nervous tic near her left eye. "Is there something about this ceremony you're not telling me?" Dave whispered to Commander Kapoor. "Only rumors," she replied, her voice tight. "Ancient texts mention the ritual of exalted reciprocity, but details are scarce." "That sounds ominous." "Focus on the trade agreement, Fletcher. Quantum stabilized palladium." "Right. Getting shot at for rocks, the cornerstone of human achievement." The grand ceremonial chamber was a massive dome whose ceiling appeared to be a living stained glass window, shifting and flowing like oil on water. Hundreds of Nexorians lined the circular room, their skin creating patterns of light that danced across the walls. At the center stood Queen Valeria on an elevated platform, wearing what could only be described as living jewelry, small crystalline creatures that crawled and repositioned themselves across her forearms. "The human Dave Fletcher," announced the minister, "who placed his fragile flesh between our radiance and certain death." Dave stepped forward as rehearsed, bowed as instructed, and silently prayed to deities he didn't believe in that whatever came next wouldn't involve permanent bodily modifications. Queen Valeria's voice rang out, clear and melodious. "The ancient laws are absolute. A life debt must be repaid with that which is most precious. For a monarch to owe is imbalance, for balance to be restored is harmony." The assembled Nexorians swayed slightly, a synchronized movement that made Dave's stomach lurch. This was definitely not covered in the briefing. "I present to you," the Queen continued, "the reward of ultimate value." 4 royal guards approached, carrying between them what appeared to be a small chest made from the same living crystal as the buildings. It pulsed with an internal light that shifted between deep blue and vibrant purple. Ambassador Wolcott looked like he might faint. Captain Monroe had gone rigid. The chest was placed before Dave, and at a gesture from the Queen, it opened on its own. Inside lay a single object, a crystalline sphere about the size of a tennis ball, glowing with such intensity that Dave had to squint. "The heart of Nexoria," Queen Valeria announced. "Our world's first and most perfect crystal, the source from which all other crystals draw their resonance. The physical embodiment of our people's soul." Dave stared, comprehension dawning with horrifying clarity. They were giving him their equivalent of the crown jewels, Holy Grail, and Constitution combined. He began, then caught Captain Monroe's warning glance. "I am deeply honored," he finished, the rehearsed phrase feeling woefully inadequate. Queen Valeria nodded solemnly. "The heart has never left our world, it has never been touched by non-Nexorian hands. You will be the first, human Dave Fletcher, and thus bonded to our world for all time." She paused, her 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "The heart now recognizes you as its guardian beyond stars." Dave reached for the sphere with trembling hands, acutely aware that one wrong move could tank humanity's diplomatic relations for generations. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, it flared with blinding intensity, and a jolt of what felt like electricity, but somehow more alive, surged through his body. In that instant, something changed. The crystal's glow subsided to a gentle pulse that seemed to match his heartbeat exactly. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. "It accepts him," whispered the minister. All evident even through the translator. Queen Valeria's mouth slit curved upward. "The ancient prophecy is fulfilled. The guardian from beyond stars shall carry our heart to the void, and a new age of Nexoria shall begin." "Prophecy," Dave said weakly. "What prophecy?" But the chamber had erupted in what appeared to be a celebration, with Nexorians swaying and humming in harmonious resonance with the crystal in his hands. Captain Monroe stepped closer, her smile rigidly diplomatic. "Fletcher," she said through clenched teeth. "What exactly did you do?" "I have absolutely no idea," Dave replied honestly, staring at the pulsing crystal that now seemed inexplicably bonded to him. "But I think I just became a religious icon." The return trip to the UES Diplomat involved considerably more ceremony than the journey to Nexoria. Dave was no longer merely a maintenance technician with questionable survival instincts. He was now Guardian Beyond Stars, Keeper of the Heart, and First Human Friend of Nexoria, titles that Ambassador Wolcott kept repeating with a mixture of disbelief and poorly concealed envy. In the shuttle, Dave sat cradling the crystal sphere, which refused to be stored anywhere except on his person. When Commander Kapoor had attempted to place it in a secure containment unit for analysis, it had emitted a high-pitched whine that gave everyone within 20 feet an instant migraine. "So," Captain Monroe said, breaking the awkward silence as they approached the ship, "you're a living religious icon for an alien civilization we're trying to establish trade relations with." "Apparently," Dave replied. The crystal pulsed warmly against his chest, where it now rested in a specially crafted harness provided by the Nexorians. This wasn't covered in my job description. Your job description is about to change significantly, she informed him. As the Guardian Beyond Stars, you're now officially Nexoria's ambassador to Earth. I'm what now? Ambassador Wolcott's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. According to the treaty we just signed, which grants us exclusive mining rights to the quantum-stabilized palladium, by the way, the Guardian must be present at all negotiations between our worlds. Congratulations, Fletcher, you're a diplomat now. Dave looked down at the gently pulsing crystal. Can I still fix things? You'll have a staff for that, Captain Monroe said dryly. The Nexorian royal family is sending 12 attendants to assist the Guardian in his sacred duties. They're following in a separate ship. Attendants, Dave repeated weakly. And they've granted you a noble title, lands on their southern continent, and apparently the ceremonial right to participate in the annual Crystal Harvest Festival as an honorary member of the royal family. Commander Kapoor consulted her notes. Oh, and Queen Valeria mentioned something about reserving you a place in their ancestral burial grounds, which I gather is an extreme honor. Dave leaned back in his seat, feeling the weight of the crystal, and his new responsibilities pressing against his chest. The crystal's glow intensified slightly, as if responding to his thoughts. 2 weeks later, Dave stood in his new quarters aboard the UES Diplomat. The storage closet with a cot had been replaced by a luxurious suite that took up half the officer's deck. The ceiling didn't have a single crack. Across the room, 6 Nexorian attendants were arranging crystalline artifacts in patterns that apparently helped harmonize the Guardian's living space with the heart's resonance. His comm unit pinged. Ambassador Fletcher, came Captain Monroe's voice. The Arcturian delegation has requested your presence at their arrival ceremony. They're particularly interested in meeting the human who's become the guardian of an alien world's soul. I'll be right there, Dave replied, straightening the formal diplomatic uniform that had replaced his maintenance grays. It was significantly more comfortable, which seemed unfair to everyone still wearing the standard issue. As he made his way to the docking bay, crew members nodded respectfully, or saluted, gestures that still felt strange directed at him. The crystal hummed against his chest, a constant reminder of how thoroughly his life had changed. Dave, a familiar voice called out. He turned to see Ortiz, his former maintenance chief, jogging to catch up with him. Chief, Dave greeted him, stopping in the corridor. Not your chief anymore, Ortiz said with a wry smile. Just wanted to check how you're adjusting to diplomacy. It's bizarre, Dave admitted. People listen when I talk now. It's deeply unsettling. Ortiz laughed. Well, there's one thing that might make you feel better. Ambassador Wolcott's atmospheric regulator is acting up again. Is that so? Dave couldn't help the smile that tugged at his lips. Yep, and since you're now technically his superior in the diplomatic hierarchy, I thought you might want to handle his maintenance request personally. Dave considered this for a moment, feeling the weight of his new responsibilities balanced against the satisfaction of poetic justice. The crystal at his chest pulsed, almost as if encouraging him. Chief Ortiz, he said formally, please inform Ambassador Wolcott that his maintenance request has been received and prioritized. He paused, savoring the moment. And tell him the Guardian Beyond Stars will attend to it personally. After the Arcturian delegation has been properly welcomed, the Rigelian trade agreement has been reviewed, and my scheduled meditation with the heart of Nexoria is complete. So, next week, Ortiz grinned. At the earliest, Dave confirmed. The Guardian has a very busy schedule. As Ortiz departed, Dave continued toward the docking bay, the crystal humming contentedly against his chest. He'd once had 3 rules for surviving aboard the UES Diplomat. Now he had just one: never step in front of flying arrows, unless the reward is absolutely worth every scar. In this case, it absolutely was.